Hey, everybody, it is Melanie and Katy, and we are back with another episode of the Make Chic Happen podcast. And we have a really amazing speaker guest that's with us today. So, Elizabeth Hartke, welcome. Can you hear us?
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you both.
I know, we're pumped. We were like chit-chatting before we were hitting record and just talking about how our paths have crossed, over the past 10 years through the direct sales space, but then also how cool it is to see the companies we've branched off, we've created, and how it's impacting people's lives. And it's really cool. Like, it's so exciting to see you in the space that you're in now. So we can't wait to kind of dive in and chat today.
Yeah, ditto. There are so many parallels. And I was saying, before we hit record, how much I'm like, okay, I know we have to record a podcast today, but I would love to just spend all the time catching up about, what's going on in your business and what things look like, because I geek out on all that stuff and I see what you guys are doing and I love it. And I think there are a lot of alignments between us both. So I'm excited to chat today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that you have been really focused on this new venture. Actually, how long have you been working in the company that you now created? And give us some context, some background into even how it got started.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So about 10 years ago, I decided I wanted to, quote, start my own thing. And in doing that, I was working in the liquor industry in Boston when I was fresh out of college. And I was working for a major global liquor company, supporting them in their marketing. And I was like, you know what? I don't like being under anyone else's thumb, but I love marketing. I love the psychology of marketing and understanding how people think and why they buy and what compels them to do certain things or not do certain things. So I started pitching myself to these bars and restaurants and hotels throughout the city. And I was like, I can do your marketing for you.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how I got my start, just kind of hustling in the city. Then I was introduced to direct sales, and I had and still have that business that's kind of self-sustaining at this point.
Mhm.
But over about 3, 4, 5 years time, so about 5 years ago, my business started to develop more from marketing into business strategy and coaching. And that's what I've been doing for quite a while now. And we had a podcast, and we had masterminds and courses and all that kind of stuff. And it was growing and excelling, but God just kind of kept placing on my heart that it was time to pivot into leadership for the sake of the entrepreneurs I was serving. Because what I was seeing, and I'm sure you guys have seen this too, in fact, I've heard you talk about it, so I know you have, where you see these incredible entrepreneurs that are so passionate about what they're doing, and the product is there. They understand what they're doing. They're really good at their work, but they're either stuck in a time for money model, or they're so trapped within their business that they can't actually live the life that they came into it to live in the first place. And or they have many of the people I work with have families, and they find that they came into it for the sake of their family, and it ends up being at the sacrifice of their family. So about a year ago, we decided to pivot, not completely. We still have a lot of our same offerings under this new umbrella, but we opened the doors to the Luminary Leadership Company, where we really dedicate ourselves, I say ourselves because it's very much a team effort, to elevating these entrepreneurs more into leadership so that they can tap into those next levels of freedom and possibility in their businesses. And we also have a division of our company called Raising Luminaries, which is dedicated to helping specifically entrepreneurial families, because we do things differently than the average family. We've chosen this different path, and it means we've chosen it for our kids and our family, where we're helping these entrepreneurs have the resources and the tools to raise up leaders of their own. And so we're supporting them to be the leader, to embody leadership for those kids, but then also giving them the resources and tools to support their kids in that process too.
I love it. And you are a mom too. So that's a big part, I'm sure, of the mission that you have within the company as well.
Yep. 3 little ones.
3 little ones. So about your day then, I'm just going to kind of digress for a second. Because you are a busy entrepreneur, what are some things or tips or strategies you even have for the busy mom who is at home with littles, who is looking at you going, how do you do it all? How do you get it all done? Can you give us some real quick tips or strategies you have for those mamas too?
Yes, absolutely. So I want to speak to the person who's in the early stage and the person who might be at a more advanced stage. In the early stage, we couldn't afford to just have a nanny. When we first had our son, it wasn't like, oh, we'll just hire full-time help. Nor did I want to outsource that time. I'd never like to give the illusion that we do it all on our own. We don't. It takes a village. We now do have a full-time nanny. And that supports our ability to continue to operate at the level we're operating at now. However, we're still home, we're eating meals with our kids, we're playing with them, taking breaks, but it just allows to make sure that someone is always, making sure they don't burn our house down, essentially. But what I would say to that mom, no matter where they're at in that process, leverage your energy when you have it. So what I found myself doing was, especially because I walked through an adrenal crash and some autoimmune issues. So there were days where maybe I could squeeze an hour out of that day where I felt like my brain was even functioning. Thank God that's not the case so much anymore. But I still find that I only have these optimal zones for a couple hours at a time, but I wasn't leveraging them. Like the first thing I would do to start my day would be either open up my phone or open up Slack where I'd communicate with my team. And immediately I lost control of my day. So now I'm super protective of whatever time period I am working, even if it's a day where I'm like, you know what, I'm working 3 hours today and the rest of the day is for the kids. Those 3 hours are going to be leveraged around my optimal zone of energy, and I don't allow distractions to creep in. So I have 2 phones. One is my personal phone. The only thing on that personal phone is literally photos, text message, and the ability to make phone calls. I have no email on it. I've disabled my internet browser on it. I had to get that discipline because temptations would creep in and you don't realize how much you hemorrhage time, even from a quick little thing on your phone. And then I have a work phone, and on that phone, because I use Instagram for my business, it has things like Instagram, but it only works on Wi-Fi. So I only use it when I dedicate that time in my calendar. So I get really strict around what I allow into my world, especially temptations, because there are a lot of moms that I've worked with, parents, anybody, that they're like, yeah, but I just don't have the time. And when we do an audit of how many times they've distracted themselves from little things, or they've used the time where their brain is working at its best to answer emails or dink around in social media, they've lost the opportunity to create content or do the thing that's actually going to move the needle in their business. So that's my biggest tip is figure out where your energy is best, you're most creative, and only allow into that time period what needs to be done to move the needle in your business.
So good. I feel like if everything, you could listen to this podcast and go, oh, that's a really great idea. I can implement that now.
Yeah.
I love it. That's a great.
I feel like it speaks my language. The productivity inside of me is like, oh, thank you so much for saying those things, but you do like, I am such that person too, where first thing in the morning is like my sacred space. Like that would be my zone of like being creative, of getting things done. And so, not opening the email, not answering phone messages, putting everything on silent so that I can just have that space. I feel like I'm a rock star when I start my day that way. I can walk into the rest of the day feeling accomplished. So I love that. But I know that kind of sets the stage for, I know we do have so many women that are trying to build a business, and we do also have so many people that listen to the podcast that also, are kind of feeling unmotivated, or they are also kind of feeling like they're losing their purpose. And just to kind of make a little bit of a shift, we're going into 2022. We are in 2022. And people are like excited to take action on their goals, right? And they're excited, but I feel like a lot of times we're still the same person that we were at the end of December, right? We're not, it's not like we magically woke up on January 1st and we're a new person. We still have the same baggage, the same self-limiting beliefs, the same worries and fears. We've just created a new pretty vision board and spent a lot of time goal setting, but we still have to kind of create that change. And I think that's hard for people when they're going after what they want, right? And so, I kind of want to talk about like, if you were feeling stuck, like, if somebody's feeling stuck in their business and maybe they're already starting to feel that willpower kind of waning in the new year and all those things are bubbling back up, like, what do you do to coach people through that, like that feeling of being stuck and helping them to kind of move through that?
Yeah, such a good question. And I don't think there's ever a level you get to in business where that totally goes away. It's kind of just, I think, the human condition. And one of the things for me that I've been talking about a lot lately is that same concept of we don't so much set resolutions as much as we continue to tap into possibility. Because for me, the life doesn't happen by the calendar year. Like my kids don't stop doing one thing and start doing a new thing come January 1st or at the end of December. Same with my business. It's fluid. So I like to do things in big chunks of time and looking out at possibility. Now, I know everybody's different as far as how they get motivated or they get inspired. And I think that's a huge differentiator is a lot of people are like, oh, I got to get motivated. And they're motivated for that first little chunk of the year. But because they're not actually inspired, it doesn't last. So I picture the difference between the two of motivation is kind of pushing this boulder up a hill, whereas inspiration is you can just let that thing go and it's cruising and there's no stopping it because it's a piece of you. So I remember in my earlier stages of business when I had different mentors that when I tell them I'd hit those walls that you're talking about, Mel, where it's like, oh, I just don't know. I'm losing belief in myself or whatever. They would be like, oh, read this book. And that never worked for me. And I always thought I was broken. I'd get motivated from it, which meant it lasted a very minimal amount of time, but I didn't get inspired. So what works for me is coming back to belief and really I like a whiteboard. I literally sitting outside my front door right now. I just ordered a 80-inch long whiteboard on wheels to add to my mini whiteboard collection because when I can tap into what's possible and what I feel called to and what's coming from me, not the market, not what so-and-so is doing, not what I read somebody else did, not what I think I have to do just because it's the natural progression in my business, but because it was literally etched on my soul. And if I don't breathe life into it, it's going to nag at me for the remainder of my days. When I can just be by myself in that moment with that whiteboard and really create, that sparks that inspiration for me. And that becomes a fire that just continues to fuel itself. So that when I encounter those moments where I'm like, I am dragging today or something. I mean, we literally just encountered this yesterday in our business. We had a big hiccup that we had to deal with. And I had one of those days where I'm just pulling my hair out and I'm saying, why do I choose this? Like, this is hard. I could ground myself in, yeah, but what's the mission? Where am I going? And do I actually believe at the core, at a cellular level, not like I write it on my mirror and it's an affirmation every morning level, at like this is what I'm called to do and I have to pursue it level. Do I really believe that I'm all in on this and that this is for me, no matter how hard it is, no matter what challenges I face, no matter how disappointed I get along the way or what anybody else says. And that belief is, to me, that spark, and I develop it through the vision of possibility. So when someone's hitting that wall, have you sat down and actually painted out a picture, not in vision board style, I'm talking really crafting what the next 5 to 10 years are going to look like in your life when you go after this thing, knowing you're playing the long game. You're not trying to just do something for this year, and you're committing to the process that comes with that. And there was I saw an interview with Elon Musk and someone asked him at the end, what words of encouragement would you give the entrepreneurs listening? And he's like, my words to them would be, if you need encouragement, don't be an entrepreneur. And I was like, yes, it's so true. We sit there looking for this validation and that's what's going to get us through our limiting beliefs. But it's really, are we inspired or are we not? Do we have within us this mission and this dream that we're willing to start and try and work at and fail? I told you where I started in the bars in Boston. My business looks nothing like that financially, personally, from what the actual work I'm doing. But I had to start there because you only get answers and more fuel on that inspiration fire from taking action. You get that feedback of, yes, this is the right direction. No, this is terrible. I got to change gears. And I think people are afraid to just go and build that momentum and allow inertia to take hold. And I do that, for me, is through that process of possibility and really envisioning.
I love that. And I think there is a really big difference. And we've all been sort of entrepreneurs for 10 years plus, right? I think all of us on this call have sort of I know that for me, I never went into entrepreneurship, like actually thinking much of it aside from my big goal, my big vision was to get the groceries paid for. And that was huge to me at the time. So I imagine that quite a few people who are on this call right now are kind of like Katy. They are kind of like man, it's cool that you have a calling, Elizabeth, but I just literally want to get the groceries paid for. So my question for you is, that calling that you believe was really etched in your soul, how do you go about finding what that is if you're in the thick of just trying to get through the day?
Yeah.
So I can tell you right now that I never felt like marketing bars in the city was a calling. When I started, it wasn't a calling. My calling was the possibility of what could come if I went all in on that thing. The same way when I went into direct sales, it wasn't my calling. It was the vehicle to get to the life I wanted to live. So I would challenge anybody to pause on the actual modality that you're bringing forth, the thing that you're selling, whatever. Pause that for a second and instead paint the picture for the life you want. And then you can come back to, all right, what are my giftings? What am I great at? What comes more naturally to me than other people? Or where is my knowledge based, whether it's from schooling or experience or whatever? And then you start to craft and get creative and inspired around the actual thing, right? The business that you're going to develop, even if it is just to pay for your groceries. That's an incredible first step. We don't all have to start with this grandiose vision.
Yeah.
I come up with things today that never even crossed my 21-year-old mind. It wouldn't have even been in my frame of reference. So you don't have to jump the gun or look at so-and-so's success and what they've done and make that your own. What's that thing that is going to light something within you? And if you didn't get dropped, like God didn't give me the vision for the Luminary Leadership Company and the work we're doing today 10 years ago when I got started. I got this little seed of kind of garbage idea to go do something and quickly learned that I hated it because I didn't want to be in the liquor industry. And then I made a little other pivot. And you just kind of give yourself permission to go today with what you have and allow it to develop. And one of the key pieces of that process for me was mentorship, because there were times where I could come up with ideas all day, but I didn't know which ones were going to be good. So I needed someone to be my bumper lanes and be like, that's a crap idea, or that's good, but we need to develop that a little bit more. Or have you thought about packaging it in this way and really crafting it? But for those that are really at that place in their business where they're like, I just need to get this thing working for me. I'm not ready to come up with this big vision. Or inspiration can be, I'm assuming, Katy, it was inspiring to you when that check came and you're like, holy crap, I can pay for my groceries with this. Like, that's inspiring. It doesn't have to be the beach house on the shores of whatever. It can be that one thing that's supporting you or your family, or just got you to that next stepping stone in the process of the bigger dream.
Yeah. I actually laugh because when I look back at that time when I had started in direct sales and I just was like, I just want to get the groceries paid for, that would be amazing. I remember going on a vision board call, and the woman who was hosting the call, who is a couple up from me in my organization, was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. I didn't actually think that she was real. Her vision was so grand and so big and so just beyond anything that even at that point in my life, I even could imagine for my own life. So it was kind of a deterrent. And I remember talking to Mel, who was my upline and who is my upline. And I remember saying, man, like, I just don't want any of that. And it wasn't that I didn't want it. It was just that I couldn't picture my life going in that direction because I've never seen anything like it before.
Right.
And so instead, I just got really curious about, like, well, wouldn't it be cool if I could get the groceries paid for? And then when I got the groceries paid for, it was like, that's neat. This actually works. Maybe it would be cool if I could get the car bill taken care of. And then it became, wouldn't it be cool to extend a maternity leave? And then it became, so it was like I had to walk into becoming a woman who could actually achieve those goals.
Yes.
The first step was I got to get curious about the how-to process of doing it. So, And I think that's even for people looking at Mel or Elizabeth or myself going, wow, it must be nice. Like you've got it figured out. But really, I just want to remind you that there was a 10-year gap between where we started and where we are now, and a lot of growth that's come in between.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like it's tiny pivots along the way. It's like, you try a lot of things, but you never give up on, I know that I'm being called in this specific direction. It's like we do things and then we go, okay, but this is great. I've learned so much here. I'm called to go this direction, or I'm called to, and then that's really where like the path, but you have to be curious about it. And if you're stuck right now and you're not curious, if you aren't, seeking out ways to get more input into your gifts, and it's really through action. It is like, you got to try it. You have to see if you like it. Actually, Katy and I just had this conversation yesterday over the weekend, and we were doing some things, and Katy was like, we had this conversation about like, that doesn't feel good. That isn't what we thought it was, was going to be, but it's okay to have that. It's not like there's something wrong with either one of us or any of the people that are listening. It's just, you become really good at listening what you want and what you don't want. It really does guide you. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. Okay. So let me ask you another question. And, when we kind of look at kind of like the day to day. So people are like, great, I'm following my passion, or I'm following this hunch right now that I think might be the direction that I want to go. I don't know if it's the end result. Like when we actually get down into the nitty gritty of that, like how does how you show up matter? Maybe it's like the day to day, like why does spending your time in a certain, we kind of talked about this at the beginning, but like, why does it matter? In order to really change your life, in order to really achieve your vision, why is getting granular important?
So much of the work that I do is in the granular with my clients or mastermind members, because they're really good. They're the big picture thinkers. They're the CEO minds. They come up with the vision, and the vision's beautiful and they're working towards it, but they don't pay attention to what their life is actually like. So if the pursuit of a dream comes at the expense of how each day is lived, was it really worth it? That day you get to that dream, you're like, oh, the entire process was brutal and I ruined my marriage and my kids hardly know me and they're a bunch of degenerates because I didn't even pour into them or raise them, but I sure did get that dream. It's like, was it really a dream for you? So the granular is critical because it's reality, and you have to drop that pin and be willing to ask those really tough questions of, why do I feel burnt out? Or what is getting onto my calendar that shouldn't be on my calendar, but I feel obligated or I have to do it? Or why do I find myself taking on so many things? The common phrasing that I hear from a lot of my clients is they feel really spread thin, or they feel split in two between work and, the kids or whatever it might be. And I have these memories. I grew up in an entire family of entrepreneurs. So my parents, my dad just retired in his 70s. My mom's still running her own business in her 60s. And my grandparents were entrepreneurs, all my aunts and uncles. So it was super normal to me that everybody was self-employed and kind of did their own thing. And the coolest part was, and it was such a gift and such a blessing, was that my mom was always present with us. We are so blessed in that she would be the one taking us to school in the morning. And then on the hot days in summer, back before these bougie kids had air conditioning in their classroom and we were all sweating to death back in the 90s and 80s or whatever, she'd bring in popsicles to school, and then she'd be at our ball game, and then she'd cart me and my friends around wherever we wanted to go, and then cook dinner and put us to bed while running the business that supported our family. And it was such a gift for her to have that flexibility. But she never really had freedom. She only had flexibility. And that's a mistake I see a lot of entrepreneurs make because they don't pay attention to the granular. Now, my mom is a special breed in that it never would appear to be a sacrifice to her. She was just grateful she was able to do that. But I have memories being like 4 years old or 5 years old and getting up to go use the bathroom at midnight or whatever, and seeing the dining room light on and dim so it wouldn't bother anybody, and her papers all across the table. making up for the lost time that she had when she was being flexible so that she could be present with us. She didn't really have freedom because if she wasn't working, the money wasn't coming in. Now, that's a big motivation behind getting into that granular with my clients so that they don't just live this life that 65 years later still looks the same, because it will if you're not strategic about the day-to-day. So in the day-to-day, for your listeners that do feel spread thin, or they do feel too busy, or like they're taking on too much, or they just, yeah, I want to scale, but, or grow or make more money, but I can't possibly take on another thing.
Yeah.
My first question to them would be, do you have your priorities and your values straight? This was something Michael and I had to do, my husband and I, because we were those people. I was realizing that I wasn't practicing what I was preaching about probably 5 years ago when my adrenal stuff started, no coincidence. And I had to come up with what we call as a family our true north. It now hangs in our dining room, and it's our family. It's not just family values, it's the playbook that we live by as a family. And we can easily look at that and juxtapose any decision, opportunity, thing that goes on our calendar up against this true north, and know with clarity, is this helping us to move towards the life we want to live as a family, including how we're going to get there through our business, or is it not? And we use it in the granular. If I have my my planner right here, and that planner honors that true north. And we ended up turning it into a workbook that we give people, that I'm happy to give your audience if you're interested. But it's something that gives a lot of clarity, because if you're sitting there being like, yeah, I don't know what to do with the granular, it might just be that you don't have your foundation rock steady, that you know what you even stand for or stand against or want more of in your life. And you're just going, you're just grinding, you're just taking on more, you're selling more, doing more, writing more emails, and thinking that that's going to be the key and the compound effect is going to kick in. It doesn't work that way. You have to make sure that the little things that you're doing actually align with the life you want to be living, and two, it's kind of the wind at your back in the proper direction of the port you're aiming at. You could end up at the totally wrong port if you're just going, and then end up disappointed because it didn't align.
Yeah. Well, that is so encouraging to hear. I know that is something that many of our listeners struggle with, that freedom versus how did you describe it with your mom? The vision is like so clear of a mom who's burning the candle at both ends, getting her business done at midnight. And I know for me, I can think of times in my business where I would do those things, and how much I've grown since then. So I really appreciate you pointing that out and putting light into something that other people might just kind of graze over real quickly. So thank you for that. But I want to ask one more question, because we really do value your time. And that is, when it comes to entrepreneurship, what is one thing that you would say will set you apart from the rest? Like, what is one little secret you can give our audience when it comes to just entrepreneurship and what will actually set you apart?
It was like immediate thought that came to my head was, don't follow the rules. Don't follow the rules, because you're gonna read the book that has the outline, the perfect framework for X, Y, and Z, and you're going to hear how somebody else did it, or you're going to see what the industry says or the market or whatever. And that's fine. Take the little bits of nuggets of wisdom and things that align with you and what your true north would ultimately become when you do it. But make your own rules, create your own ways that you break out of the status quo that everybody else is doing. That's how you set yourself apart. You go inward, not outward. I think we all sit here and we look at what everybody else is doing. And I believe deeply in learning from other people and mentorship and being in community. I think all of those things are priceless. But if you're using those as a crutch and not a tool, you're limiting your potential and possibility. And the fingerprint of you, that thing I talked about that should be somewhere there etched on your soul, that might take some years to really unearth and figure out what it is. I know that I'm still discovering mine.
Yeah.
It gets hidden beneath all the things you think you should do or could do, and you lose the opportunity to really sit in stillness or silence and just hear what it is that's calling you. For me, it got so dang loud. I had no choice but to make that pivot. We were at our peak numbers financially. We were seeing our highest downloads on our old podcast. Everybody, every mentor, every person was giving us the feedback. Oh, just rebrand the podcast so you can keep the numbers, or don't pivot now. You're at your peak. And
Wow. Yeah.
But I knew it wasn't in alignment with where I ultimately was called to go. And it's been the best decision I ever made. But the only reason that I could do that was because I tapped into my intuition and I didn't follow any of the rules. And I know that's tough. They're like actual Enneagram numbers that are rule followers. So that's going to be hard for some people who that's their nature. That is like the opposite of my nature. You give me a stop sign, I'm like, oh, you mean go faster? That's great. Yeah. I hate rules and I love breaking them. But for those it doesn't come naturally to, you can do it in a way that doesn't hurt anybody else, but it's really beneficial to you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it is. And I find that like I have an ability to listen to the way somebody's built their business and say, I don't have to do all of those things, but I can do one of those, right? And then deposit that in and then go over here and listen to somebody else and go, ooh, I like this part of your business. Let's put that in here. And it really is like, there are so many people who have paved the way. There are people that have generated and grown amazing businesses, but we can like look at each of them and say, but I get to design that for myself. Yep. I get to determine on what the boundaries are and, how big I want it to be or what my gifts are, what I want to say yes and what I want to say no to. And I do think people just have a hard time. They have a hard time speaking up and saying, this is truly what I want. And so I think that takes some courage, that takes some confidence, that takes a lot of self-reflection in order to figure out that direction of where they want to go, Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Okay. So I do want you to share the workbook because yes. I do feel like the day-to-day does really matter. And I do feel like people want to download that. And we do want people to that's the one thing. Like, that's the thing with Chic Influencer. We help people bridge the gap from where they are to where they feel called to go. And it's really messy in the middle. It is. And you need some guidance. And so I know Katy and I, we have the Make Chic Happen planner. We have the time blocker, but if you have a resource that could enhance their experience, we would love for you to share that too.
I would love to give that to your audience. And it's a tool that no matter where you're at in business, this can work for you if you're brand new, just dipping your toes in. And I have a mastermind that's 7-figure earners, and we've used it for them to break through the next level. It's universal. And the way we designed it is if you have, my kids are young, 6, 4, and 2, and we actually did parts of it with the kids and my husband as a family so that your business values should not differ from your personal values. So bringing those together is really powerful, but you can find it at luminaryleadershipco.com/true north. So that's the best place to snag it, and it'll just show up right in your inbox for free. But it's one of our favorite tools, and we literally keep it in it's like a laminated copy we keep in our kitchen, and the actual final product we had painted and put it in our dining room. And it's cool. A big part of how we're doing business, but it's also how we're raising our family, and it feels really clarifying once you go through it.
So cool. All right. We'll put that in the show notes for everybody so they can easily click on it. But where can people find you if they want to know more about you? Where do you hang out?
So the best place to find me is hiding in my barn office. No, I'm just kidding. So if you come over to Instagram, I'll be there at Eliz Hartke, and please feel free to connect and reach out. I will say I do practice what I preach, so I don't always answer right away, but I do my best. And if you come on over to the luminaryleadershipco.com, we have great ways to connect and support however we can. And we have some really cool stuff coming up for those entrepreneurial families who are looking to support their kids in leadership, some in-person events and things that I think will be really exciting to the people who are wanting to raise their business as they raise their babies.
I love it. I love it.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your time. It was great connecting with you. And you guys, make sure that you head over to her page. Let her following know that you were listening, that you checked out the Make Chic Happen podcast. And also, show notes are going to be loaded this week. So make sure you take a look. As always, we will see you next time on the Make Chic Happen podcast. Thank you.